Hey guys, here's another study with some audio. This study was, I think, 5.5 hours. The image is just off Google from Game of Thrones. The character I think is called Daario. A pretty cool character and a really nice screenshot. Right now, just using the flat round and establishing the background, just trying to get sort of the right values down. Not too worried about it, trying to get it in the right placement. This study I'll also just be doing straight to color, so no lines or anything like that. This is a really good study because of the subtle changes in the hues and all the different colors for the belts, and the leather armor is very interesting, really cool. I've been favoring lately just using the flat round and pretty much doing most of the image just with a flat round, and right at the end using a few texture brushes to make it look not so plasticky. And the texture brushes really save time, but yeah, I could use them from the beginning, but I don't know. Lately I've been doing it like this. It might change later. I had a lot of trouble with the colors in the leather and the face especially. They're very tricky. A lot of the values are very close together, and a lot of the grays feel very blue, but on the most part, a lot of the grays are just desaturated browns or something like that. But then they look very deep blue. So I kept trying, like, going to the blue spectrum and trying to get the color. But yeah, I was having a tough time. Always find placement like this quite difficult. But yeah, I'll get better, I guess, as I go. It was a lot of fun. I was only gonna make it 3 hours. That was gonna be my deadline for all these upcoming videos, for the studies for the videos. But yeah, I decided I could get a bit more out of this, so I decided to extend it a little bit. I didn't want to go like 10 hours or something crazy, but 5 hours is long enough. I didn't end up finishing it in the end either, but that's not really the point of the study. Study is just to learn, and I felt I got enough out of it at the end of 5 hours. So I think I could have stopped at 3 hours, to be honest. I had already established most of the values, and pretty much everything was in the right place. Like, there was no texture or anything like that, but it was far enough for what it was. Just like a warm-up before my work. I keep making the background a bit too saturated. I need to pay more attention to that in the future. So everything here is still pretty straightforward. Still just trying to get the values down, trying to put paint on the canvas. It really does get easier the more you apply. And as long as things are in mostly the right position, you can always adjust as you go. And the more points of reference you have, obviously the easier it's going to get. So I didn't get any questions from my previous video that I posted, so I'm just going to anything that I think might help or that might pop in my head through the video, I'll explain or something like that. I have really been favoring the flat round, even in my client work, just using the flat round for a lot of it. The problem is the flat round is nice and all, but it does make things very plasticky. It's much easier to get to a finished like piece with texture brushes, as long as you know how to use them, obviously. But yeah, you can always go like, yeah, the first like 40% or so using the flat round or something like that, and then use texture brushes. But I would imagine it would be a lot faster if you just skip that. I just seem to like it this way for now. Sometimes when you are painting a lot, like painting every day kind of thing, like what I do for work and stuff, sometimes even though you know of faster methods, sometimes using like just things that you're interested in at the time or a favorite brush or something like that, it just makes it a little more fun, even if it's not the best way that you know at the moment. It's always good to explore. Here I'm just still using the lasso tool and trying to put things in the right place without having to repaint it or anything. Just it really helps to keep the canvas zoomed out when you're fixing the proportions and stuff so you don't go into detail. It's something I struggled with a lot in the beginning, so nowadays I just keep the canvas as zoomed out as possible for as long as possible, and I feel it really helps. The colors aren't really spot on, but they're close enough to move forward. Here is where I started zooming. I felt I got enough down to where I could zoom in and start doing a little bit extra detail. Maybe even a little past this point would have been enough for the warm-up because I wasn't really focused on anything particular. I am using a lot of leather in my work at the moment, and the facial hair and the messy hair is also stuff I am using, but focusing on too many things in a study, you're not going to remember enough. So it's always best to focus on one thing. So in this instance, I am using a lot of this for my work at the moment, but it would have been maybe better to focus on the leather and then go to my client work and start painting leather and paint all the leather bits, and then focus on the face and the facial hair, and then go to the client work. Like that, you would have had a better grasp on things and remembered things a lot clearer. But yeah, that's not what I did. I guess these are half and half. On the one half, I want to learn, and yeah, I'm trying to get as much out of it as I can in terms of the study, and on the other half, I want to start posting more videos, and I can't do too much rubbish. It can't be so messy where it just looks like absolute scribbles. So yeah, I have to balance the two. Really just focusing on the face now. That was pretty much the only thing I did focus on. It started getting lengthy. I think at this point it was 2 hours or 2.5 hours at this point, and at that point I was still under the impression that I was going to only paint this for 3 hours. So I wanted to paint on the face a little more before I called it done. But I was enjoying myself. This was quite fun to do the study, and I wanted the image I did for the video to be a little better. I don't know, maybe that's vanity or something. It's always hard to do something, to do like scribbles or something really messy and just for functionality. So you're doing a study and you're just doing it for the purpose of learning, and then you want to post that thing that you just did for the purpose of learning, and usually most of the time it looks absolutely like rubbish. But those studies that look like absolute rubbish are usually the ones you learned the most out of, or you got the most out of it. But then you're posting it, and then people look at that, and then you get self-conscious, or you don't want to look like you suck. So it's hard to post those. So usually my way of tackling that is when I'm using a lot of the studies I do, I don't even post, because it takes away that pressure and it makes it a lot easier to just focus on learning. You want to have some sort of presence online, so like no one forgets, so no one thinks you're dead or something. It's always good to have a presence online for work and for the community and stuff like that, because that helps everyone, because you're posting work and that work is motivating someone else. Also, because you're posting work, you're getting more exposure and people are thinking about your work, it's being circulated, and you get more job opportunities, and everyone likes being motivated and likes sharing things they enjoy. So if you post cool images and stuff, they're going to share it, and yeah, it all helps. It helps other people and it helps yourself. I guess it's also better, instead of just doing studies like this, to do personal work. I think you get a lot more excitement out of that. Well, other people get a lot more excited from personal work you do rather than studies, because studies are cool, like it motivates people in the way that they're like, oh, okay, this person's pushing hard, they're trying to learn. Yeah, I should be doing that too. And that's cool and all, but when you're posting your own work, then they're like, oh, this image is cool or something like that. And it usually circulates a lot better than a study. Also, people that aren't artists share things like cool images as well. Someone that isn't an artist or isn't a part of the industry isn't going to share a study or something that's like not even finished, or no one's going to do that. So it's always best to post personal work, or like sketches from imagination, or anything like that. Even client work when you're allowed, like when the NDA runs out or whatever. That's also harder as well. I guess if I took this 5 hours, instead of doing the study, I took the 5 hours and I did something from imagination, and then I posted that. Like I would get something mildly finished, and that, yeah, that would probably get more excitement from the community and stuff like that. But at the same time, I wanted to learn. This is the time I put out of my day to learn certain things that I was going to use in my illustrations coming up. Like, sure, you can do the same thing instead of doing a study like this. Could have done like something like a warrior dude similar to this, and just used this as reference and done that. And yeah, that is also a good way of learning and stuff, because instead of just directly copying, you're adapting what you see into your own idea or your own work and stuff. That actually does sound like a better idea than what I'm doing, but I just wanted to do a study. I like doing studies. Maybe a bit too much. I'll try in the future to post more just personal stuff or imagination stuff. I have a few videos that I've already recorded of some of the work I've done for clients, but they're big files because a long image, some 30 hours or whatever it took to finish that image. It's a lot of work because if I'm going to spend that long making into what, like a 5 hour video or a 6 hour video, I don't want to just do what I'm doing now, which I just look at the image and I just sprout of stuff that pops in my head. I'd want it to be a little more structured, and that requires more time again. So that's why I like doing these, because I'm gonna try keep doing these because it's a bit easier. The plan to do these is a bit easier. Like just 3 hour study, and then you take 20, like then you compress it to 20 minutes and you do 20-minute audio over the top, and you just ramble whatever comes to mind while you're looking at the video. It's time efficient, and it's still getting some work out there, which, but yeah, I don't know, we'll see. Yeah, I'm just using some texture brush. Well, yeah, they're like hair brushes. One is one I made for hair fluff or whatever. I had it in one of the other videos. It works pretty good, and I'm just trying to make it look as random as possible for the facial hair. And then in the image here, speculars, so all the little white dots and stuff, and the highlighted hairs. So I'm doing that on different layers over the top. We'll say, I find when you're trying to do speculars and stuff, even if you're working a different, it's always better to change the layer to like a linear dodge or something. It gives whiter whites and stuff like that. It it gives a much better contrast, much better speculars. So yeah, I'm trying to get the value right. I noticed here that I made the facial hair a little too dark, so I'm just using a lightened layer, and I color picked the skin tone that I had above the cheek, and I'm just using it to lightly go over the hair to just bring the value to a little more what is in the reference. You notice for the skins, there's a lot of blues and grays. It's very, very interesting, like face study. Really awesome lighting. The shot they did in the Game of Thrones in this episode was really a really great shot. Like great lighting and a great costume. there's tons of really awesome screenshots for the Game of Thrones seasons, so it's really great to do studies of them. You can really learn a lot. You can learn a lot from a lot of different movies, but especially Game of Thrones. I've been really enjoying doing studies and stuff from them, especially for fantasy stuff. Where a lot of your, if you do in this industry and stuff, a lot of your work is going to be fantasy or sci-fi, and they're very kind of narrow. So if you're doing fantasy, it's usually knights and armor and stuff and dragons. It's always that kind of fantasy. It's very narrow. And then when you're doing sci-fi, it's usually space and aliens and like mech suits and stuff like that. So anyway, I don't know where I was going with this, but just saying, it's great for fantasy. Even though it's more on the realistic side of things. It's not high fantasy Game of Thrones, but the costumes and the settings and stuff are all very cool. So as you can see, I'm really working on the face quite a bit. At one point I was thinking of cropping it to just be like a portrait study and then posting that, but then I was like, oh, I spent so much time on the body and all this stuff, I might as well show that too. That was mainly just because I was going to say the time of how long the study took, and then you're going to be like 5 hours, but I did the face and it doesn't even look finished. So yeah, I guess that's more vanity, I guess. I was fairly happy with how it turned out. I really honed a lot of the brushes for the hair and stuff. I'm getting the technique that I like. I'm like getting it down quite well. It's pretty much the flat round to establish like the planes and stuff, and then I use a brush that has multiple little dots in it, so it makes, instead of when you do one brush stroke, it does 4 or 5 hair lines, and you use that to create to actually start making it look like a bit of strands, so you're breaking up the bigger shapes. And then usually I use like a soft round, and then I use a hard light layer, and I go over like some areas and stuff to up the saturation or darken it and up the saturation or something like that to give more like richness to the color. And then I'll use like a very hard, it only does one hair stroke, but it's a very very sharp brush. It's really good for getting all the areas where it's really sharp highlights, because you must remember in shadows it's going to be soft lines, and you don't want to use too many hard edge brushes in the shadows, and then in the light you want to use like hard edge brushes. And that's why I like using that brush for the highlights, because it's very hard edged. There's a lot more to that obviously, but that's the gist of it. And I don't always follow that either, so yeah. It's always, sometimes if you have bad habits and stuff, you figure out ways around your bad habits. Usually I just go, in the end I use a blur brush, and you just blur the shadows a little bit. Here I'm using that same brush that I used for like the fluff in the beard. I'm using it around the hair, and that's just to create a little more variation, because sometimes if you go too tight with the hair and stuff, it kind of starts looking like a helmet, and you don't want that. You want it to look loose, and yeah, you want it to look like hair, not a helmet. Obviously you want it to not look solid, and that usually is when you're using too many hard brushes and it's not enough variation. So it's too many perfect straight lines in the same way, and there's no fluff or stray hairs. and usually the edge of the hair, like your outer line, is usually too hard and dark. So I like to, at the end also, you go over just around the edge line of the hair. You just use a soft round and you select the background color and you lightly go over it to kind of give it a little more. You're like just softening the outer edge a little bit. It really helps. I felt at that point, well, quite a while back now in the video, but I felt that the hair was fine, and I started moving on to the face, the eyes, and the nose. I didn't do a very great job with this, but good enough. It's always good when you're doing studies, if you're not using it in client work or something after that, it's always good to do an imagination picture afterwards. It does get hard when you have client work, because usually client work is going to be taking up most of your time, and it gets very difficult to juggle studies plus an imagination piece afterwards and then doing your client work. That's why it's a lot easier to look at things in your client work and do studies of those things. So if you're doing an angel with wings, or you're doing like a sea monster or something like that, you can do the sketch, the overall sketch, and get down the composition and stuff like that. And then when it gets to like the fish scales, you can do a study of the fish, and then focus on the scales, and then do a study of like water ripples or like waves, and get like a very good grasp on which brushes to use and how to use the brushes to quickly illustrate the texture of the water and stuff like that. You must always, when you're doing studies, it's not just about getting the right color and the right value in the right place. It's also about finding the most effective way to paint the textures for whatever you're studying. So if you're doing like a rock texture, make sure that the brushes you're using quickly demonstrate the texture of the rock without you having to use like a flat round or something and going in and smudging and scribbling and stuff. It just, that wastes a lot of time. And that's what the texture brushes are there for. They're there to save time. So yeah, most of this was just, yeah, it pretty much did turn into just a portrait study. I think, what brush am I using? I think I'm still, oh no, I'm using a texture brush. I thought I was still using the flat round for the face and stuff. Now, there is a lot you, like, if you were wanting to take the study to finish, I never did that. I decided after 5 hours or whatever, that was enough. It's enough time. If I'm going to do any more than that, I might as well do a personal piece or finish one of my personal projects that I'm working on already. Like, I want to learn and I want to do these studies each day, but I have other things to do as well. So you can't just waste it all on this. But yeah, if you wanted to go further with this, you could use texture brushes to get the pores and even out the skin a bit more with like a texture brush, and the smudge tool, the mixer brush could fix around the eyes. In my image is a bit too dark, and so you can fix that with like a soft brush and lightly go over it. Overall, the study was quite enjoyable, and for me at least, I find studies quite relaxing. All the information's there. You just need to look at it and just apply it to your painting. It's very simple, very straightforward. When you're doing personal pieces, that's fun in the the beginning stages where you're figuring out the composition and you're figuring out the subject matter and all that stuff. And but when it gets to the rendering side of things, to get like a finished image or something like that, then the hours stretch quite long. So it's nice and relaxing, I feel, to do studies like this, and you're just busting it out, and it doesn't need to be finished, and all the information's there, so you don't have to do too much thinking. Like you are thinking when you're trying to learn, but at the same, it's not the same thing as doing a personal piece where you need to think about the composition and you need to think about the subject matter and the design of the outfits or the monster, the creature design, and it's not, yeah, there's a little less thinking than that. And yeah, the learning part of thing can get very addictive. When I started doing studies in the beginning, it just escalated. It went from one study that I tried to do it for like 3 hours or 2 hours, and at that point in time I was quite slow and I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to use a lot of brushes. So yeah, it was very hard to do anything in 3 hours. And then as I kept doing it, I got better, but then I just kept doing the same amount of hours. So it went from like 4 hours to then I was doing like 7 hours of studying a day, and I just, it was more and more and more to the point where just as much client work as I was doing the same amount of studies. So like the same equivalent in hours. And studies are great and all, but you want to work it with the same amount. It needs to be balanced. So you need to have, if you're doing like 3 hours of studying, you want to be doing 3 hours of imagination stuff. So you're building both facets, both sides of the coin. You don't want to only rely on, you don't want to like just build your ability to copy something. You need to also be able to do stuff from imagination to apply what you're learning when you're like doing studies and stuff like that. They work hand in hand and you need both. Well, that's it for today. Thanks everyone for watching, and I'll try get another video out soon. Thanks. Bye.